Manly Hall official is glad to produce, publish and offer. The gate that leads to this. An outline on Shintoism. Although Shintoism has a following of nearly 50 million persons in Japan, it is very little known outside of the country. From my own research, it also appears that the theological elements underlying Shintoism are unfamiliar to the average Japanese. Books dealing with the subject approach it historically or are satisfied to set forth the division, levels, and grades of the cult and list its principal sanctuaries. If you're enjoying this video and finding value in the content, we kindly ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel. A large portion of our listeners and viewers haven't subscribed yet, and by doing so, you'll help us grow and continue bringing you more high-quality audiobooks. Your support means a lot to us, and it's just one click away. So, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to stay connected and never miss out on our latest releases. In spite of the obscure nature of its beliefs, it has always had a strong hold upon the minds of the people, and perpetual subscribers to the faith include persons in nearly every walk of life. It has equal standing among leaders of the nation and those of more humble stations. Early Western writers on Shintoism called this religion the way of the gods, and assumed it to be based upon veneration of nature and the worship of ancestors. The present tendency is to modify the older viewpoint as inconsistent with modern Japanese intellectualism. Also, there seem to be alternative meanings for many of the terms found in early translations of Shinto texts. The Japanese word that has been translated as gods is kami. Technically, a kami is not a divinity but a kind of spirit, one of a legion remembered or honored for a special reason. This more or less parallels the Western concept of sainthood. In Christian theology, a saint is not a god, but a person of high spiritual attainment. It is permissible to address prayers to saints and to assume that they possess the power of intercession. Candidates may be selected for canonization from many different walks of life. During their earthly existences, they may have been very humble like Jeanne d'Arc, or of royal estate as Saint Stephen of Hungary. Some saints belonged to the military class and were honored as defenders of the faith. Saint Augustine is revered as one of the most learned of the early church divines, Saint Thomas Aquinas as a heavenly enlightened philosopher, and Saint Albertus Magnus for early research in science. In Shintoism, martyrdom is seldom, if ever, a factor in deification, although it is important in Western Christianity. The Japanese recognize two orders of human benefactors. The first is a small group remembered by name and for particular deeds, and the second group is made up of those unnamed and forgotten men and women of long ago who served, lived, sacrificed, and died, who can be considered as anonymous benefactors of Japanese culture. It is appropriate to honor these unnamed ones, and as Dr. Yagani has pointed out, there are many little monuments along Japanese roadsides inscribed to unknown and forgotten artisans whose labors have contributed to Japanese traditions. There are many shrines to national heroes who have become kami. The sanctuary of Hachiman near Kamakura perpetuates the memory of Ajin, an early Japanese emperor. The great Toshogu shrines at Nikko are probably the most elaborate in Japan and are believed to be the abiding places for the ghosts of the military dictators of the Tokugawa family. In Tokyo, the Meiji Shrine was created to honor the great Emperor Meiji, founder of modern Japan, and his consort. The shrine was destroyed in World War II, but has been rebuilt. The grounds of the shrine are reminiscent of Central Park in New York, or Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. A huge gate called a torii stands at the entrance. There are beautiful stone lanterns bordering the walkways, and it is a favorite place for folks to congregate for social activities. We would call the Meiji Shrine a great city park, and it serves most of the functions included in the Western concept. There is one difference, however, unique to Shintoism: it is a sacred park. This detracts in no way from the pleasures of festive occasions, but it permeates the park with an intangible but very real spiritual quality. A simple example is littering. No Japanese would think of profaning such a place with waste papers, candy boxes, or beer cans. It is a religious duty to protect beauty because every square inch of the land is sacred ground. The Japanese, however, are not somber about these things. The kami, whoever and whatever he is, enjoys the happiness of those who visit his abode. He loves to hear the laughter of children, and he listens sympathetically to the forlorn stories of frustrated lovers. He likes to have circuses and carnivals, and perhaps his attenuated sensory perceptions appreciate the aromas from the various food stalls that are set up on holidays. He is also very fond of animals and birds, and in this, he shares the sentiments of his Buddhist co-religionists. He assumes that those who come to enjoy some of the best moments of their lives in his shrine will have their fun and leave everything in perfect order. Kami are not necessarily human beings. The wedded rocks bound together by Shinto cables, a grand old tree adorned with paper streamers, a quiet pool with golden carp, all these may be kami. If you ask why such things are sacred, there may be an awkward moment. Perhaps it is because all nature is alive and unusual evidences of age or beauty inspire special veneration. After all, the old tree creates a mood in the beholder, for it tells him something of strength and the beauty of great years. Because a message can come to him only through a living messenger, there is some kind of life in the tree itself, for it ennobles character, refines temperament, and preserves respect for the beautiful land which has so bountifully provided for her children since the dawn of time. Because of its diversified characteristics, Shinto cannot be defined simply as ancestor worship or emperor worship. Very few of the Japanese emperors were ever deified, and those who were share the honor with mountains and valleys and irises growing beside a temple pool. A farmer whose faithful ox has died may build a shrine for it, and it joins the legion of kami to receive a small bowl of rice on appropriate occasions. Ancestor worship certainly plays a part in Shinto belief, and each home may have its kamitora or god shelf. Especially at the time of the Abon ceremony, the living invite the spirits of their parents and grandparents to visit their homes, enjoy the company of their children and grandchildren, and find the family happy, busy, and most of all, free of debt. A shadow of Chinese ancestor worship cast itself across Japan more than 1,000 years ago. The Chinese are more formal in venerating their dead, which has caused many persons to believe that they actually worship their forebears. In Japan, however, the relationship between the living and the dead is far more casual. You bow to your ancestor, not because he is a deity, but because you bowed to him when he was alive. Confucian respect for the old mingles with the Taoist concept of universal life. In Japanese cosmology, primordial beings usually considered as divine were the progenitors of the races inhabiting the islands and also were the founders of the imperial dynasty. The Japanese like to believe that their emperors have reigned in an unbroken line for more than 2,600 years. The imperial house was founded by Amaterasu Omi Kami. She was the kami of the sun, and Shintoism is one of the few religions to venerate the sun as a feminine divinity. The great kami who founded the empire are regarded as the protectors of the land, and around them has arisen state Shintoism. Japan is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. It is highly volcanic and consists of rich forests and incredible varieties of rock formations, small streams, lovely lakes, and a wide diversity of flora and fauna. The inland sea includes nearly 1,000 islands, many of which are uninhabited. Tourists refer to the Japanese Alps, and this is no exaggeration. Only a short distance away is a beautiful river known as the Japanese Rhine, with feudal castles at strategic points along its banks. From the far north with its snow and severe winters to the almost tropical south, the Japanese islands parallel the Asiatic coastline. Even the Japanese themselves have very little good to say about the climate, which is especially unpleasant during the summer months when heat and humidity prevail. Actually, the variable climate contributes a great deal to the richness of the natural scenery. The natives live in an environment of natural beauty and rustic charm. It is only in such a charming region that indigenous art could flourish and the lives of the people could be subordinated to the grandeur of the land. Until recent years, when industrialism expanded with incredible rapidity, the Japanese preferred to subordinate themselves and their own achievements to the scenic beauties of the country. Their homes were simple and no effort was made to bring man into arrogant conflict with his natural world. Even today, the greater part of Japan is unspoiled. Except for such industrial centers as Tokyo and Osaka, the old spirit lingers on. The density of the population is not oppressively noticeable, and the countryside has the same charm so evident in Austria and Switzerland. Everywhere, religion has contributed to the artistry of the landscape. The spires of pagodas rise above the treetops. The blue-tiled roofs of Buddhist temples are half hidden in secluded groves, and the Shinto torii stand by the side of the rice fields. It is not difficult to appreciate the Japanese point of view that the gods or spirits created this peaceful atmosphere for their favorite progeny and made them gardeners in a terrestrial paradise. All the arts of Japan are influenced by the sensitive communion between the individual and his environment. Fuji-san, the peerless mountain, is a place of Shinto pilgrimage, and even today, thousands of pious souls seeking spiritual refreshment climb its rugged sides. It is commonly said that the height of Fuji-san is the same as the number of months in a year plus the number of days, 12,365 feet. There are many native pictures of the goddess of Fuji in clouds above her mountain. The Japanese are born travelers, and most of their journeying is inspired by religion and aesthetics. There are days when autumn leaves fall on the surface of slow-moving streams, and there are times when snow piles high on temple roofs and along the great ridge of the Japanese Alps. One should not miss the war of the fireflies over the surface of the river at Uji, or those precious days when prunus blossoms open before the leaves appear on the tree. Everything is symbolical, rich with lore and secret meaning. Shinto is certainly a kind of nature worship, but it is completely informal. You breathe in the spirits along with the perfume of their favorite flowers. The entire empire is inhabited not only by the living, but by the dead. When Chief Seattle, for whom the city of Seattle, Washington, was named, ceded his lands to the American government, he gave a magnificent speech which is considered to be among the greatest orations in the world. And when the last red man shall have perished from the earth and his memory among the white men shall have become a myth, these shores will swarm with the invisible dead of my tribe, and when your children's children shall think themselves alone in the fields, the store, the shop, upon the highway, or in the silence of the pathless woods, they will not be alone. In all the earth there is no place dedicated to solitude. At night, when the streets of your cities and villages will be silent and you think them deserted, they will throng with the returning hosts that once filled and still love this beautiful land. The white man will never be alone. Let him be just and deal kindly with my people, for the dead are not powerless. Dead, did I say? There is no death. Only a change of worlds. In Western religion, there has always been a sharp division between the living and the dead. Those who pass out of this life depart forever from those whom they have loved and served in mortal life. Primitive people were not of this mind. Life goes on and our ancestors are very close to us. They share in our purposes, rejoice in our happiness, and suffer with our pain. It is therefore part of the duty of the living to be contented, patient, and honorable. As said earlier, it is hard for a traveler from another country to understand the philosophy of Shinto. It is all very intuitive. You cannot study it from books, but you can experience it according to the receptivity of your own heart and mind. I can only explain what Shinto means to me, taking full responsibility for my interpretation. There seems no other way to approach the subject, and the Japanese themselves have a tendency to follow the same procedure. It is estimated that there are over 100,000 Shinto shrines in Japan, and one of them, near Kyoto, sacred to the rice divinity Inari, has over 10,000 torii in its grounds. The spirit of rice is sometimes depicted as an old gentleman with sheaves of rice straws at the ends of a pole which he carries on his shoulder. Occasionally, the figure is feminine, but in either case, it rides upon a fox, and pairs of stone foxes are placed near the torii at the entrance to the sanctuary or are scattered along the pathways leading to the inner parts of the shrine. Whether it stands near the shore of the inland sea at Miyajima, or rises from the clear water of Lake Biwa, makes no essential difference. It is essentially a gate, but it encloses nothing. No fences or walls lead from it, and you can walk through or around it according to your choice. Its symbolism may originate in Taoist concepts, which later reached Japan to provide some of the most delightful enigmas of Zen. Taoism refers to a gateless gate which can be anywhere and is everywhere. It divides two worlds, standing at the exact point where now meets then or here meets there. To the mystic, the Torii is at the junction of objective and subjective consciousness. When you stand on one side of the gate, you are in the world of now. Take 3 steps and you stand in forever. There is no division between the worlds except a mood of believing, a shift of perspective, a new orientation arising within yourself. There are beautiful gardens on both sides of the gate. One is the garden of the outer life, and the other is the garden of the inner life. The troubadours have this philosophy, for they had their mystic garden where grew and flowered the rose of eternal life. This also describes the rose garden of Sadi, the Persian poet. When you step through from here to there, you also join those who have gone before. The rows of memorial lanterns remind us that within the magic circle guarded by the Torii, time ceases, and we all share in a common eternity. Sitting in one of these Shinto gardens, it seems very easy to believe in immortality or in the kindly spirits that guard the place. If a supernatural being came toward you down the winding path, you might not even be surprised, for your mind is no longer locked in physical realities, which might rationally be considered reasonable. It is not surprising that those who visit the enchanted realm of there and then should have mystical experiences or follow practices not so different from Western spiritualism. Minor miracles are performed while the Shinto priestess, in her robes of red and white, shakes the cluster of bells which she holds in her hands and performs dances that go back to the dawn of Japanese history. Living oracles in Shintoism. Living oracles under enchantment proclaim the fates of men and charms, guards against evil, contribute to peacefulness, and the sense of well-being. Greek religion began with nature worship, and when Socrates chose a place to discourse with his disciples, he always prayed to the invisible guardians that they would bestow upon him eloquence with insight. Dryads lived in trees, nymphs by the sides of fountains, and the great god, Pan, played his pipes in the reeds by the river. So deep and firm was the belief in elemental creatures that they were doubtless seen by the devout in dreams and visions. Under similar circumstances, the shades of the illustrious dead might rise in the midst of ritual as Samuel was invoked by the witch of Endor. While many of these stories will be passed over as mere superstition, there is a significant fact underlying them. Those who worship nature are not afraid to die. They live in a universe where there is no death, only a changing from here to there. When one steps through the Torii gate, he may either go to sleep or awaken from sleep, depending on the convictions of his own consciousness. It may be that the mortal world is the realm of dreams, and those who depart therefrom awaken as from a troubled sleep. In conventional accounts, the Torii is sometimes referred to as the perch of the phoenix bird. When this celestial creature descends to earth, it must not put its feet upon the ground, but there are always appropriate Torii where it can rest and favor the neighborhood with its wonderful presence. The phoenix has always been associated with the mystical experiences that occur to entranced persons. It is equivalent to our concept of a vision or the appearance of a supernatural being. It arises within consciousness, the sky, and fills the inner life with luminous serenity. However, such a spiritual occurrence must not be profane nor become involved in material matters. It must be preserved in the soul, which psychologically is located midway between the spirit and the body. The soul receives into itself the experiences of mortal life and conveys them to the spirit. It also serves as a messenger by which, in dreams and visions, the desires of the spirit can be impressed upon the mortal mind of the human being. This concept, though not formalized in ancient times, may be a key to the meaning of this strange gateway. It would be a mistake to assume that the Torii is essentially Japanese. Its form has certainly been modified to conform with the Japanese love of simplicity and their profound regard for wood. Actually, similar types of gates are found in Korea, China, and India. Probably India was the source of this type of architecture. Outstanding examples can be seen at Sanchi, an important Buddhist monument near the former feudal state of Bhopal, which is now Madhya Pradesh state. The Indian gates are intricately carved, usually with scenes from the life of Buddha or symbols of his sections. They open into the circular corridors around the central dome, where circumambulation is ritually performed by pilgrims. Circumambulation suggests man's journey from the cradle to the grave. It emphasizes the Buddhist belief that physical life is a sacred cycle of regeneration and purification. Similar gates lead into the sanctified precincts of the Temple of Heaven in Peking. The intent is similar, for always the gate separates profane and sacred areas. Like the Western concept of sanctified ground, space set aside for holy purposes is protected by the divine power, and those who would profane holy places will feel the displeasure of the gods. In the case of the Torii, we are reminded that the sacred land Yamato was fashioned by deities who drew up mud from the bottom of the ocean on the tips of their spears. From this mud, they fashioned the sacred islands, large and small, and choosing the best and most fertile area, declared it to be their home. On this land, they established their sacred race that was to rule forever. The Japanese islands, with their magnificent scenery, were an earthly paradise, but it belonged not to mortals, but to the kami who guarded it from their regions above the earth. According to the Bible, when Adam and Eve were cast out of Eden, an angel with a flaming sword guarded the gates so that they could not return. In a manuscript I found in Japan, there is the accompanying drawing of a torii with the sword of Fudo standing in the arch. As Fudo represents the immutable law of karma, which defends the heavenly world where the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas dwelt, so his sword prevents those from passing beyond the gate unless they have expiated the evil in their own natures. In other words, only the redeeming mind can experience the mysteries of the happy land. Shintoism is really more than an ancient nature worship that has survived through all time as a curiosity. With practically no theology and an almost non-existent ethical and moral structure, it is difficult to understand its utilitarian value. A Shintoist might say that for those who have found kinship with the earth and sky and live the simple life of reverence for the wisdom of existence, no special creeds or doctrines are necessary. You do not have to accept anything or deny anything, or argue over theological doctrines if you simply live close to the earth and respect its laws and its creatures. There is one exception to the general lack of dogma, and that is Shinto's emphasis upon cleanliness. In this faith, it takes precedence over godliness. To bathe the mind is to keep it clean of all negative and destructive attitudes. Washing the soul removes therefrom all taints of selfishness, avarice, and jealousy. Then you dip the body in hot water and emerge completely refreshed. While it has generally been assumed that Shintoism is the indigenous religion of Japan, modern criticism has modified this point of view. A number of Japanese authorities believe that at a remote time, many elements of Shintoism were brought from the Asiatic mainland. The dominant Japanese race, as we know it today, colonized the central area of Honshu Island approximately during the first millennium BC. Prior to this time, the Ainu people evidently occupied the region, and even today, a number of Japanese place names derived from the Ainu language. Some have pointed out that the name Fuji itself is an Ainu word. It is also evident that Shintoism is a conglomerate of older folk beliefs, as were many other religions of the ancient world. Mongolian migrations moving eastward brought with them their tribal cults, and as powerful clans became dominant, they imposed their traditional beliefs upon their less powerful neighbors. Several Japanese authorities suspect that Shintoism reached the Japanese islands by way of Korea, which also has a complicated legendary history. In any event, these migrant clans had their own concepts of the origin of the world and the deities responsible for the processes of creation. The same was true of the North American tribes. Each of the brood families, though numerically small, had its own explanation for the mysteries of the universe. When, as in the case of the Iroquois League, several dominant tribes created a powerful cultural federation, new mythological patterns were formed. Many of the elements of this remained unreconciled. In Egypt, each of the nomes had its own gods, and it was not until the rise of the Osirian cult that the tangled skein of Egyptian metaphysical thinking was finally unsnarled. Fujisan is the continuing symbol of Shinto grandeur and one of the most important shrines of pilgrimage in the country. In Shintoism, the kami communicated with their human children through mediums or natural psychics. While entranced, these shamans selected the sites for important shrines, reported on the disposition of the tutelary spirits, and performed most of the duties associated with shamanism. The American Indian medicine priests performed the same functions. When it was necessary to determine the will of the olds and the trues, the priests went out at night and performed vigils. They set up their prayer plumes to the four corners of the world, smoked the calumet, which might be considered an American Indian incense altar, to the directions of space, then sat quietly wrapped in their blankets waiting for the voices that spoke from the air. Sometimes these medicine men seemed to hear the words, on other occasions, they had visions, and in a few cases, their spirits left the body and made the dangerous journey to the great medicine lodge in the sky where the sachems of old sat in council. It may well be that these Amerindian practices had drifted over from Asia long ago and had the same origin as Shinto psychoism. The first human emperor of Japan was Jimmu Tenno. Prior to his day, the land was ruled by the gods themselves. Various dates have been assigned to Jimmu, but his accession is officially given as February 1, 660 BC. He was directly descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu, thus in a sense may be considered the first great Japanese culture hero. Many nations have traced their dynasties to divine beings, which, as Thomas Carlyle points out, have been sanctified by the veneration of ages. Jimmu is represented in art as a long-haired, heavily bearded man wearing loose white garments somewhat similar to those we now associate with judo or karate. He had a necklace of magatani, carved stones resembling the claws of tigers, and he carried a tall bow in one hand. Above his head circled a golden hawk, and in statuary, this is sometimes shown perched on the end of his bow. According to popular history, his career began at Kyushu in the extreme west of Japan. Accompanied by a band of devoted followers, he went by boat up the inland sea, subduing aboriginal tribes and protected by heaven. He finally reached Yamato, aided by miraculous occurrences, and died at the age of 137 years. When the new Constitution of Japan was promulgated in 1889, the day selected was the 11th of February in honor of Jimmu Tenno. Tracing from the accession of the Emperor Jimmu, Japan claims to have been ruled by one dynasty for over 2,600 years. Genealogical tables list the principal events in the descent of the imperial family. The three sacred symbols of the dynasty, the metal mirror, the necklace of stone beads, and the sword of Susanoo, are always depicted. The transition to a unified Japan, the Momoyama period, 1573 to 1603. The transition from medieval feudalism to the establishment of a united Japan took place in the Momoyama period, 1573 to 1603. The processes involved very closely resembled the rise of a united Europe through the ascendancy of powerful families that gradually absorbed the smaller states. At this time in Japanese history, three remarkable men arose: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Through the courtesy of merchant missionaries from Europe, Nobunaga was introduced to firearms, which gave him a distinct advantage. By nature, Nobunaga was dedicated to the concept that the end justified the means. He was a ruthless militarist but had the insight to realize that if the country was to be unified, the logical procedure was to strengthen the position of the imperial family, which was languishing in genteel desuetude in Kyoto. He also decided that the time had come for a clear separation between religion and government. A number of Buddhist sects, especially the Tendai, involved themselves in the civil wars and used their moral influence excessively. Nobunaga destroyed their temporal power forever but conceived the usefulness of strengthening the position of the Christian minority. His final intentions remain unknown, for he was assassinated by one of his generals in 1582. At the time of his death, he had two powerful lieutenants who remained loyal to him to the very end. One was Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and the other, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Hideyoshi quickly took power, and Ieyasu bided his time with commendable patience. Hideyoshi is probably the most dramatic personality in Japanese history, and the only commoner to attain the rank equivalent to prime minister. He had joined Nobunaga in a menial capacity, but his abilities were quickly recognized, and in less than 8 years, he became a national figure. Under Hideyoshi, many of the severities of Nobunaga's rugged policies were relaxed. The Taiku, as Hideyoshi was called, attained great wealth and rebuilt many of the temples that Nobunaga had destroyed. He also handsomely financed the imperial family and showed exaggerated veneration for the heavenly line of descent from the sun goddess. As years passed, the Taiko patronized arts and crafts, rewarded many civil servants for their fidelities, but, like Napoleon, created a sphere of influence that did not survive him. He made no adequate provision for the perpetuation of his house and left only inconspicuous descendants. At Hideyoshi's death, Ieyasu emerged from his years of watchful waiting and took over the country. Not especially prepossessing in appearance, heavy-set and extremely homely, Ieyasu settled down to a long-range program. He established his court at Edo, which was renamed Tokyo. He was content to rule while the imperial family reigned undisturbed. As the first shogun of his line, Ieyasu organized the country in a manner appropriate to a field marshal. Though he had little time for scholarship, he derived great inspiration from Confucius and set up a system of law, not only for his own protection but for future generations. Ieyasu shrewdly observed that a happy country had to be free of injustice. All classes must have their own aspirations and spheres of accomplishment. He governed with an iron hand, but nearly all of his decisions were wisely and thoughtfully made. Ieyasu, for example, reminded the gentry that when they ate their rice, it was the peasantry that provided the food. He forbade his fiefs to build castles, declaring that they contributed to arrogance, lest in time they would attempt to restore the feudal system. He required that the rich should live moderately, dress plainly, and be free of any ostentation that might arouse the envy of the less prosperous. He actually imprisoned persons who dressed too handsomely. The shogun made it a cardinal offense to downgrade the government. He pointed out that no administration is perfect, but anyone who undermined duly constituted authority was guilty of treason. Small treasons led to imprisonment, major ones were punished with death. Yet with all his severities, Ieyasu left his country with the final adage, "Return good for evil." The system which he created, now called the Tokugawa shogunate, survived for over 250 years, during which time the country was free from all internecine strife. The people flourished, arts and crafts were cultivated, and the kabuki theater was the popular form of entertainment, even though the average theater burned down at least once every 15 years. The Tokugawa shogunate showed signs of weakness in its later years but was brought to an abrupt end when Japan was opened to the West. At this time, the Tokugawa family surrendered all its powers to the emperor. The Toshogu Shrine. It is not surprising, therefore, that Ieyasu Tokugawa should be included among the national heroes. He died in 1616, and so years after his death, his grandson completed the Toshogu Shrine at Nikko, and Ieyasu is buried in its precincts. There is some difference of opinion as to the aesthetic propriety of the shrine. Perhaps we can coin a term and say that it is Japanese Rococo. For the Japanese taste, everything is overdone, but a steady stream of foreign visitors has stood in awe of its grandeur. Among the popular curiosities of the Toshogu Shrine is the famous image of the sleeping cat over one of the archways, which is so natural that many think it is a real animal. Even more famous, perhaps, is the original carving of the three monkeys, popularly supposed to mean see no evil, hear no evil, and say no evil. The psychology of the Toshogu Shrine is forthright in the proper spirit of a powerful and wealthy family of military dictators. In fact, it is the enduring palace of Tokugawa Ieyasu. He lives invisibly in its precincts in the glory he was accustomed to in mortal life. There is no place where the ghost of Ieyasu could find greater happiness than in his own land. The great rows of cryptomeria trees are now among the glories of his shrine. It is recorded that one of the daimyo, who was unable financially to make a handsome contribution to the mausoleum, conceived the idea of planting avenues of cryptomerias along the approaches to the shrine. More than 18,000 of the original trees still stand, and in many respects, overshadow the grandeur of the buildings. The sacred bridge at Nikko was, until recently, reserved for the use of the imperial family. When I was there 50 years ago, there was a serious international incident. An irrepressible American tourist, in spite of many warnings, decided to walk across the bridge. He was promptly arrested and was finally released on the grounds that he was mentally unbalanced. The accompanying illustration shows the entrance to the Great Toshogu Shrine, the torii which guards the sanctuary, and a few of the great trees that line the way. Groups of Japanese schoolchildren, accompanied by the inevitable photographers, have group photographs taken on the steps leading to the platform on which the principal shrine stands. No doubt these young people are reminded of the code of self-discipline which made possible the Meiji Restoration and the unified empire of today. Copyright 2025 by Manly Hall Official. Thank you for listening. Please consider to subscribe, like, and share to help the channel growth. New videos on a daily basis.